Welcome to the Mind for Success podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Lebbing, and I love seeing business professionals, leaders, and entrepreneurs have massive success in their businesses. Are you ready to reach a higher level in your business? Are you looking to rise to the top and break through the barriers that are holding you back? If this is you, join us on the Mind for Success podcast. Welcome to the Mind for Success podcast. I'm Kimberly Lebbing, and today I am excited to introduce our guest, Amanda Neely. He is an entrepreneur, profit first, and bank on yourself professional, and the co-host of Wealth Wisdom Financial Podcast with his wife, Amanda Neely. They founded and managed Overflow Coffee Bar, L3C, from 2008 through 2018. And now they share their experiential knowledge through podcasting and through developing personalized financial strategies for individuals and for couples and profitability strategies for businesses. Thank you, Brandon, for being on today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I know it's a mouthful. It's so hard. I didn't even put in my military experience and music experience because I was like, all right, that's not relevant, but sometimes it is.
It is. It's all about the story. So it's cool, but it was a mouthful. But I loved meeting with you and finding out about what you do, especially the Profit First piece, because I read that book years ago and was just really intrigued by it. So I'd love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about your backstory and how you got started.
Yeah. So my wife and I are in business together, and we're still married. So that says a lot right there. We've been, doing business together from the coffee shop years to now running our own financial firm. And I would say she's the brains. She's great. And when we first started our business, I had the great idea of going out and starting a coffee shop because I wanted to make a difference in the world. Coffee is the second most widely traded commodity. Americans the number one consumer. Poorest countries are coffee growing countries. I'm a person of faith. I was like, well, somebody needs to do something about that. And usually that's you when you say that. And it comes up multiple times. So then I tell my wife we need to do this, and she's the one that actually has to make the crazy ideas reality. So then we went on this adventure to start this coffee shop. Did it all, I don't know if we'd say all wrong, but we didn't have a rich uncle to help us. We started with the idealism that it's going to be easy, and got into it. And I will tell you, we had some probably drop dead fights, some big things that happened in the business that just made me think a lot about even why I'm in this business now. That we almost got a divorce a couple times, but we had too much debt. That's why we couldn't get a divorce, because we're like, well, how are we going to break this up? So in our second year, we had a miscarriage. Our cat died. My mother-in-law had a stroke. I think her dad had a heart attack. My grandma died. And this wasn't even the business. This was personal. And then, you have to go in and go into the coffee shop and smile because people are going to ask, how's it going? And you have to be like, great. And it wasn't. And that was such a hard thing, and why I tell people have a team around you that care about you, that are there for you, not just for the business, but for you. 3 things I tell people when they go into business is know that you're called to it, because it's going to be very hard. So you got to know, because when it gets hard and you get slammed in the face, you get back up, right? It's part of my military, I guess, background. And then have a team around you. That is so important. Like coach, a guide, somebody that cares about you, not your product, right? And then know your numbers. If you don't know your numbers, then that you're going to be, someone else's numbers, and you kind of want to figure that out. So that was a long answer, but was something I learned from that and led me into saying, okay, now we're going to transition to something else.
Yeah, I love it. And it's so important. So you touched on knowing your numbers. So I'd love for you to expand a little bit on that.
Yeah. So most businesses, and my business name was Overflow, the coffee shop. And what I learned was business owners oftentimes are last to get paid, right? And you have two types of business. The one that overpays themselves and buys the thing and says it's on the company credit card, right? And then they'll just rack up credit cards. And then the one that underpays themselves, right? And we had come across this thing called Profit First, and had a conversation with a lawyer where we were gonna grow our brand, right? We were planning to grow it big. And he asked us, how much are you paying yourself? And we're like, well, we paid off all of our debt. This is after the second year where we overcame a lot of those things. We've been disciplined, but we aren't paying ourselves that much, right? And that also is why we ended up selling the business, because I have a 4-year-old now. Previously, I did not, right? We decided to sell partially because of having this lawyer say, how much are you paying yourself? And that punch in the gut, and realizing we need to start taking care of ourselves. Our business name was Overflow, but I wasn't able to overflow because I wasn't taking care of myself, right?
Right.
Both physically, mentally, emotionally. And we made some shifts and said, okay, we have to do this. We started doing that. A baby came into the picture while taking care of our mother-in-law who lives with us, that we transitioned.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like it was a good thing.
Oh yeah, but I think you have to realize a couple things. When you go into business, you have to give it everything, right?
Yeah.
Too many people are like, I'm gonna just try it, but you have to put it all out there. We have a 5-year, we're gonna burn the bridges and everything, but then if it's not working out, we can walk away and feel okay about it, right? That's that sunk cost fallacy thing where people just keep going in the wrong direction because they're like, well, I've been doing it. I'm like, well, I can. And so that was where we had a flood in the business that kind of said something while my wife was pregnant. We didn't know at the time that she was pregnant when the flood happened. But those things helped me to leave it. But also I positioned the business where we could sell it and not close it, because we knew our numbers. We were able to go in and say, I have a brand, I have this amount of emails and this location, and we were able to sell it for a profit.
Very smart. So I'd love for you to also explain a little bit about, we talked before we got on here, the power of infinite banking. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So infinite banking, and this is where everybody will tune out or say they know or whatever, right? And this is the thing that I've learned in business ownership and in general life, right? The more that we can realize we don't know anything, the better, right? And there's a lot of talking heads out there that will give their opinion and say this or that, and really, this is why having a good coach or a guide that helps you is so important, because we didn't know that Dave Ramsey loves to hate on this thing. It's properly designed whole life insurance. Designed, it's more of a cash value kind of a thing, designed more for the cash accumulation. So in our business, in the coffee shop, our biggest liability was us, right? Our biggest asset was us. So you will insure a car, you'll insure everything else, but yet we don't insure ourselves. And then people will say, well, by term, it's cheaper. Well, I also need the ability to access capital and more capital as I grow, right? So what we did was our biggest asset, and needing not just to lock it up into something that I couldn't use, and even thinking about this from a 401k kind of point of view. How would I match myself, right? Doing the company match, I am the company, right? That's just not going to work. So I needed to think of a way to build and have leverage accessibility. So we built this policy. It was a lot of money for us to save this amount of money, but we used our cash value, because we were long range thinkers, to take care of business debt, right? High interest debt. Because I don't know if you know this, but when you don't have a business or you're just starting out in business, banks like a track record. And it's really hard to get capital for your business when you're starting, especially if you're not paying yourself either. So that was one thing. And then we were able to use it when that flood happened to get out of the emergency, because it still takes a little time to get money from insurance. So we were able to float that. And Trip, we used our same cash value as we were building, because we're still thinking about saving, but leveraging using it and paying it back. We bought a property, our house, for when we moved to Cincinnati. And now we are in the process of buying a building for my office. So I'm personally going to own it, but my business is going to be the renter. I'm wearing different hats, right? My business is now going to pay me rent, and I'm using a big portion of my cash value so I can make the premiums or payment back as I see fit, because I know my numbers, right? And I now created 2 assets out of 1. 3 technically, because I've now have a place for my staff. They're making money, hopefully. I've now have the property, right? And I have my policy as well.
Nice.
Crazy, right?
Nice. Right. Yes.
Why are people doing
mind
this?
Blowing.
And I'm like, why is this not talked about or told? And I think it's because we, like, the other side wants us to kind of stay in confusion and chaos and stay in putting it locked away, right? But we have to start thinking for ourselves and thinking about how can we take control of this. And it starts with our minds, right? It starts there.
Absolutely.
And it'll go everywhere else. But most of the time, people don't even have that figured out.
Right. Yeah, I have 100% agree. And it's really a cool concept.
Right. And
I mean,
the reason our business name, and we're transitioning, but it's Grandma's Wealth Wisdom, right? The reason we called it that was because that's what they did, right? They used that. I mean, watch, what was that? Was that Christmas movie where he says, all I have is my whole life insurance, right? That was his asset.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah. It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
And who was he fighting against? The banks.
Right.
Has it changed? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. And I could tell you, if you research It's a Wonderful Life, it actually was almost going to be banned because of it was supposedly communist or something.
Oh, that's really interesting. One of my favorite movies. So that's a movie I'll watch even in the middle of the summer because the mindset piece of it. But I didn't know that about the history.
Yeah, Google it.
I will definitely be looking.
The only reason I learned that was because I watched something that wasn't very wholesome, Criminal Minds, Criminal Minds show, and the smart guy brought that up, and I was like, really? So then I Googled it and started researching, and that's how I learned. So I don't just know weird things like that.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay if you do. No judgment here. So I would love for you to talk about, you also talked about being your own CFO. And I know that goes along with knowing your numbers, but talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I think that here's the thing. If you're a business owner, do not delegate this stuff. Like we might delegate some of it, but I've seen fraud happen, right? I'm just going to give it to my bookkeeper or my accountant and they'll deal with it. We're not going to be CPAs, we're not accountants, but at least understand a little bit of what's the language going on. And, I am not a bookkeeper. My wife, I told you, she's really smart. She does all that stuff, right? But I do know how to read a P&L statement, and I know how to kind of look and say, are we healthy or are we not? And too many businesses or in general, we are consuming more than we make, right? We are, it's just basic calorie intake and outtake kind of stuff. But if you're not keeping track of that, if you're not being diligent about some of those things or making healthy habits, you're gonna end up unhealthy, right? So that's why we've created some of our systems to kind of think through what are those habits to help us be on the right track, right? Making sure I have apps. Do you use apps or anything?
Yeah.
Track anything?
Yeah.
So I have a app that I use called Fitbod, and I use it every day to go to the gym and work out, right?
Right.
But I also learned I have a 4-year-old who brings in a lot of candy, and I learned that, man, I'm doing this thing, but I'm doing this thing over here that's countering this thing, and I got to figure out the system. And that's part of knowing your numbers, being your own CFO, kind of knowing what to track and when to track it. That's why I love Profit First, because you can set these in rhythms versus just saying, oh, I feel like I'm going to do this right now, but you put a rhythm around it.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. So tell us a little bit about your still method.
Yeah. So the still method came out of, again, we're again, people of faith, right? So our coffee shop name was Overflow, right? That came out of there and saying, we're going to overflow. And in the Bible, there's a few things about being still, right? Being quiet, setting back. Those, one of the authors, it says put thinking time in, right? I forget the author's name, but I think it was The Road Less Stupid. That's the book. And so we've been, thinking about this thinking time and this idea of still, and saying, okay, we need to do that. Why aren't people doing that with their money? And the world is saying chaos, confusing, haphazard, anxious, overwhelming, and stressful. Those are what's happening. I don't want that. I don't know if you want that, but I really don't want to live in that world as much as the world wants us to live in that place. I want to be in a place of stability, right? And that's why I love infinite banking and why I love the foundations we're building, like building the solid rocks and building it up. So still is, of course, an acronym, because I love acronyms. My wife loves acronyms more. Is a method that she thought of, so don't steal it. It is, and it will be patented or whatever you call it soon, but set your sights, right?
Oh, okay. Set your sights.
If you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there, right? At least have an idea. I do tons of financial analysis with people. You'd be surprised how many people don't have goals, don't actually haven't figured out where they want to go, right? So you need to set your sights. Where do you want to go? What kind of business do you want to create? Because if you don't know that, you'll create a monster. That's the cash-eating monster that Mike Michalowicz says, right? I don't want a cash-eating monster. I want a business that I love and loves me back. So you have to set your sights. What kind of marriage do I want to have? All those kind of things, and really ask those questions. Sit with it, right? And then the T is track your in and out.
Mhm.
Tracking what's going in and what's going out. It doesn't have to be money. It could be date night. It could be, having time with your kids, whatever that is, tracking those things. That's why I love tracking apps. Sometimes they can be a little overwhelming, but track in and out. Then you got to inspect your progress, right? Actually, don't just track it, don't just budget, but inspect. What are things that are happening? What's it telling me, right? Because those things that you do, if you're tracking, it's going to tell you a story, right? Everything will, right? So you want to inspect, and then you want to look for 1% adjustments. It's not just saying, can I get there tomorrow, right? That's what everybody says. Like, I'm going to be this overnight success, but it's those 1% adjustments that get you there. And if you're doing this at your sites, you make those adjustments, you'll it's like kind of orienting a little bit, right? So you want to look for those 1% adjustments that you can make, right? And that's sometimes cutting costs, right? That's a waste of money. Is this fitting within my what I want, right? And then the next one is live deliberately. You have to be deliberate in all this stuff, right? That's why I have a life insurance policy and I fund it. I'm deliberate, and I said this in how I built my policies and where I'm going. Kind of have an idea. Well, will things change? Absolutely, right? That's why you do this on a regular basis, and you go back monthly, and we'll do this as my wife and I will go through it regularly. We'll set our sights. Is this still applicable? Or does this goal that we want, do we still want it? Right? Because it could change.
Yeah, absolutely, it can.
And so then you do this. And what's funny is when I do financial analysis with people, what am I asking them? What are your dreams and goals? Setting your sights. What's there? Tracking. You look at somebody's checkbook, or not checkbook anymore, I guess, but credit card statement. You'll be able to tell what they value, right? I'll be able to see what they want. Inspecting, and then I'm just trying to help them orient to where what they say actually goes with what they believe, or what they say and believe may be different, right? Sometimes,
right?
And that's a hard thing, and that's why most people are asleep at the wheel. It's because it is a challenging thing to deal with this, but that's becoming more self-aware. We all have roadblocks, I believe, but asking those questions, I think, are super powerful.
Yeah, absolutely, they are. That's really helpful. So I will. I hope that anybody listening to this took some notes, because that was really helpful.
And it's so easy, right? I'm like,
it is.
Why isn't anybody? And so we're eventually going to write a book after my wife gets her CFP. She'll get that done, and then we'll write a book. We have a playbook. So if you go to stillmethod.com, it's the playbook, and you can download, and it'll be expanded. But often it's just writing, of course, download the playbook, but you just write STILL on the side of a paper, and you ask questions, open-ended questions, right?
Right.
And we do this. We have a community. It's wealthwisdom.mn.co. And in that community, it's a very small community, but we do this monthly as a community, business owners, and we do an hour where we just go through the Still Method, right? Which is kind of fun. It's not very many of us, but it's going to be big, I think. But so if you want to join, wealthwisdom.mn.co. My wife writes all kinds of great content there.
Okay, great. So for our listeners, we'll be putting those links in the description of this podcast. And I want to encourage you to go check out what he has, the download he has, because it's really valuable information. And I think, like you said, and today, especially now, I feel like this is something people really, really need.
I mean, we're told to be on social media. We're told to be on everything and be everywhere. And that's why we're reading these personally, being less hurried and doing certain things. Because again, as we're business owners, we're also the pace setters. And if we burn out, there's no business, right? And so we have to figure out, again, reverse architect. What is it I want to be? Do I want to be a 6, 7, 8-figure business that isn't serving me? Right.
Right.
Yeah. I see that all over the place. I'm an 8-figure business. I'm like, yeah, let me see the numbers. Because I've seen 8-figure businesses and 7-figure businesses that isn't healthy. Right.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's insightful. And I think in whatever you do in different aspects of your business, it's always a good thing to slow down and take a new evaluation of where you want to be. So 100% agree. So listeners, go to his website, grab his things. I want to thank you Brandon for being on today, because it was just a lot of value. So thanks again for being on.
Oh, I love it. And if this helps your listeners just to slow down and figure out what they want, man, that's what I want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks again for being on the show today.
Are you ready to break through the barriers that are holding you back and reach a higher level in your business in just 4 hours? Be sure to click the link today and join other high-achieving professionals that have worked with Kimberly Lebbing to accelerate their success.